All right, everyone. Today on Maybe Now the Morons in Congress finally learned their lesson. They're learning a brutal lesson here about executive power, and they've literally taken several steps over the last year or so to try to sew up some loose ends with this. Trump is now threatening to utilize some of his emergency powers, which are wide-reaching. That was sort of the point in the wake of the 1970s, to basically shut down U.S. companies' holdings in China, force them back here as opposed to operating there. This would destroy the Chinese economy. The problem is that China is seen as a place to invest due to growth. If all of a sudden it stutters and their economy falters because all that U.S. influence dries up, if all that investment goes out of the country, moves either back here or maybe to India or something, if that were to happen, we'd take a brutal hit. We'd hit recession right away. That one much is clear. China would fare worse. The problem is that if you have the two biggest economies in the world both going into recession, China arguably a Great Depression that would cripple them for a generation, that will drag the whole world economy down. It's economic doomsday. What Trump is threatening is essentially economic nuclear war. That's basically what he's threatening. Congress, ironically enough, the one good thing about this, as far as if you're like a classical liberal, like in my opinion, Trump should use other methods probably to deal with China. I don't want the U.S. economy to go into recession, and I'm not sure that it'd be good for his re-election chances either, to tell the truth. Let's say that he pulls the trigger and does this, and he's threatened this like on Mexico, and he pulled back, and he negotiated. This could just be 4D chess, and probably is. But the one greatest thing about when Trump does stuff like this is Congress then feels compelled to rob the executive branch of power that it's been slowly giving it more and more of for many years. Like up through the Bush and Obama administrations, Congress basically decided to stop doing its job. Like the idea was that they would say, well, the president can do whatever he wants with regards to conducting strikes. We don't care. We don't have to authorize it continuously. So now the president can wage eternal warfare anywhere in the world, and it's fine. They completely got rid of their military responsibilities and just said, well, he's commander-in-chief, let him take responsibility. Let Bush go bomb other countries. Let Obama drone people. Who fucking cares? They've partially scaled that power back from the executive branch to restore it to where it should have been in the first fucking place. Never should have changed after 9/11, or in some ways before that in the wake of the Reagan era. Never should have been changed. Now Congress has to authorize things a bit more. Good, that's what should happen. Congress should have skin in the game when it comes to declaring war. Congress is not paid to sit around on their asses and watch one person act like a consul. That's not the way in which the United States was meant to operate. So while I think that we would win such a trade war, albeit one that's not necessary, I hope it doesn't end up happening. And my hope is that this pushes Congress to rescind this executive authority that's been given to presidents since the what was it Nixon or Carter at the time? Or maybe Ford, one of those 70s administrations. Back from the bad old days of the 70s that nobody cares about. That 70s show was better than the 70s, says everyone who lived through the 70s. Just ask my mom. Really funny. Then the 80s come and everything's perfect. We need to go back to the 80s. The shopping mall shouldn't be empty. Anyway, so Trump is threatening this action. According to my understanding, based on what I've read, he does have the authority to do this. That when he declared to U.S. businesses, I'm ordering you to leave China, he has that authority. It may sound a little bit strange to people because they're like, well, you're not the boss of me, you're not a dictator, you're president. Congress authorized the president of the United States to fundamentally do this. Now, the actual declaration via Twitter, of all places, is not legally binding. It has to be in paper and signed and notarized. What this act gives Trump the ability to do is come out and say, I'm banning U.S. businesses from continuing to operate there. You must bring your assets in a timely fashion back to the United States. After a reasonable frame of time, he has to explain to Congress why, and they can hold a joint resolution to reverse that decision. Trump has the ability to make life very, very difficult for a lot of U.S. businesses. The one thing holding him back probably is the fact that he's seen generally as a pro-business, business-friendly president who's overseeing a growing economy. The thing is, in order to force China back to the negotiating table, I think that he's playing chicken with them. I'm not sure whether he's willing to press the little red economic button. By the way, if he does, this means Bitcoin will probably be a lot more valuable, so I'm glad that I didn't sell that off. By the way, that's not investment advice. I'm not a a legal expert or an economic expert. It's funny how you have to say shit like that every time you mention money. Oh, I'm not giving you stockbroker. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm not giving you fiscal advice. Do whatever you fucking want, dude. I don't know what's going on in the world. I don't know anything about jack shit as far as that goes. No, I just analyze it every fucking day. It's interesting how you practically have to hire a lawyer to be able to talk about money. You talk about news and foreign events, politics, war, stuff like that, epidemics and disease, nobody has a problem. As soon as it comes to investing, it's a big difficulty. Anyway, it's funny to watch Trump threaten this. I don't know, you can weigh in the comments. This is something I'm interested in hearing others' opinions on quite a bit. Do you think he'd actually be willing to do it? Do you think he'd actually be willing to basically perform a leg sweep on the Chinese economy? They would crumble into dust basically right away. The U.S. economy would then hit a recession, although it would, I think, recover thereafter. U.S. businesses they have the ability, the power to transfer their assets to other countries. Of course, what could happen? Let's say that I've built a factory in China because it's cheap. They don't care about labor laws, workers' protection, child's rights, smog. China don't care. They just want me to invest there. I've built factories there. If this were to happen, would that not necessitate China seizing my factory's physical assets as quickly as possible, like nationalizing them? That could be a problem because then me as an investor, I'm out, how many tens, hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. Is Trump going to make the notes good, so to speak? Is the federal government going to be willing to crank out a bunch of money and bail me out in order for me to switch over and start building in India? And then the Chinese, they get a free factory out of it. Of course, then they become pariahs, and then other investors probably flee China too. The problem for China would be if Trump encouraged investors and so forth in other countries as well to follow suit. Basically, if he decides an economic war on China, he's like, the Western world must stand now, or we won't have the economic power to do it in the future. I'm forcing all U.S. businesses to do this. You follow suit. China collapses. We're going to punish them. The other possibility, of course, is that China starts hemorrhaging money so fast that all the other, like India, becomes the main BRICS nation, I guess, at that point, money-wise. What happens if China goes to war over the issue? They do have nuclear weapons, then there is a deterrent there that's quite substantial. The Chinese weapons, their main weapons, are, I think, bigger than the Russian ones. If I remember correctly, their average missile is like 10 megatons. Most of the Russian systems are between 3 and 5, I think, and then they've got a handful of the Satan missiles that they're phasing out, but most of them, I think, are lower yield than that. The U.S. is the one that has mainly smaller missile sub-base deterrents and things like that. We've got thousands of single megaton missiles, but China focused on the really big ones that they fire from their landmass to ours, potentially. The problem, like, if one of their missiles hit Rutland, even though I'm quite a ways outside of the downtown, I'd still get killed by the overpressure. If it were a 1 megaton weapon, I'd survive. I'd be able to see it out my window, but I'd be fine just sitting in the basement with some iodine pills. But if it were a Chinese weapon, no, I would be ghoulified, I guess. I'd die much more painfully. I wouldn't get vaporized. The wall would vaporize in front of me and basically fill my body with wooden shards and rip me apart. If I survive that, like if a chunk of wood doesn't go right through my brain and kill me instantly, I'm going to suffer pretty badly. Let's hope that the gamma radiation fries off the nerves at least a little bit so it's a little less painful. Oddly enough, if there's a nuclear strike, you might as well just hope to be right in the eye of the storm so that you just get burned into a pile of ashes. They'll burn you into a pile of ashes quicker than the nerve conduction velocity, so, you won't feel a thing. I know it's a little bit grisly to think about, but we've got to think about all possible situations. And when we're talking about the new equivalent of nuclear war for the economic world, which is the two main players of the world grappling with one another on the way down to see who dies first and who doesn't hit the ground with a thud, it could be a big problem. It'd be a problem for me personally, too. I mean, I'm assuming that if there were a Great Recession-style situation, I'd be selling fewer books. I'm assuming I'd be getting fewer donations. Belts would tighten all around the country. We'd win the economic war, but at what cost? Is it worth waging when there are other potential possibilities? China would be well warned to take very seriously the concept of Trump actually doing this too. So far, for the most part, he pulls back because he gets a signal that the other party is willing to negotiate. China's not giving that signal yet. He could actually do it. and more in just a technically hollow Twitter thread. It's interesting to see Congress now getting worried about Trump's power. Oh my God, he's a tyrant, an authoritarian, an imperial president. No, we had two of those in a row and you kept expanding their power. Now you've got someone who's using that same power, waving his dick in your face and mocking you. He's actually doing it for good reasons, too. He's not a tyrant. He's trolling you, you idiots. That's about all. Peace out.